Hey, all my Pisces friends. My name is Teri Hunter. I'm an intuitive astrologer, and I'm here today to talk about Jupiter's retrograde in your fourth house of home and family in Gemini. This video is based on whole sign Western astrology. So when I talk about Pisces, I'm referring to Pisces rising as dictating the landscape of the chart. If you don't know your rising sign and you're a Pisces sun or moon, you might want to get your time of birth and location and go to one of the free birth calculators on the internet and just plug that information in and you'll find out what your rising sign is, and then check out that video for your information about Jupiter's retrograde because the house structure is important. So for our Pisces rising, what we're seeing is that Jupiter is in your fourth house of home, as I said, of it's not just home and family, it's how you were nurtured, how you were, um, it's the maternal experience, it's how your family roots and the country of origin shaped your perceptions and your sense of self-worth. This Jupiter retrograde is going to revisit some of those themes and specifically revisit themes that may have taken place in late July, August 19th, around the week of August 19th into September. I say this because Jupiter experienced its first square while it was moving direct to Saturn retrograde in your first house of self, of your identity, of your perceptions, of your ego, of your drive and your ambition. And as Saturn has been going through your first house, it's been really tasking you on some level to create dynamics that are sustainable to the self, not just the self as you perceive it, but to the body. The whole first house is where the soul is experiencing itself in the physical for the first time in this lifetime. And here, as a Pisces, as a Pisces rising, there's a kind of this is a house of duality. We see, the Pisces energy is very compassionate, very loving, very empathetic. And at the same time, because it's so empathetic, the horrors of the human experience can be very traumatic for Pisces, and Pisces can want to escape. It's to have the house of the invisible, of the self undoing, of the unseen, what is hidden, as the first house can be very conflicting because you can want to express yourself and move yourself forward, and at the same time want to tuck in and hide. And Saturn's transit through your first house, and Saturn is currently retrograde as I record this, but Saturn will ask you to really create strong relationship with the divinity within you, a strong relationship with your creativity, a strong relationship with your willingness to be compassionate, but also to be compassionate to self, so that when something outside of yourself becomes too much, you know where the boundaries are. And this could directly be related to your experience with your home and your family, because Jupiter's retrograding there right now. Now, Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, so it's in the house where it's least comfortable, the furthest from its home, and yet at the same time, Jupiter is having to come down from the mountain and live within the everyday experience of Gemini, how the everyday human thinks, how they speak, how they interact, how they interact with social media and with journalism and with community and those around us. So the challenge for Jupiter in wanting to see the big picture is having to come down and endure the details. I think for my Pisces, there's a good possibility that a lot of this has to do with how your family raised you in respect to money. Jupiter rules wealth, your own personal religious beliefs, if they are still aligned to this current chapter you're living in or the awarenesses you've garnished. Retrogrades are a lot about reflection. And when we look at Jupiter, we're very much looking at the reflection of my family's belief system, my family's willingness to expand, my home life and how I demonstrate Saturn in the first house, my beliefs. And when I look at a square, I often feel like a square is it's like a fork in the road where there's such tension on some level. There's such a feeling of being aware of the old energy and then having to sort of push, that's the tension, into a new dynamic that makes me feel inspired and passionate and hopeful about my future. So now when we're looking at Pisces, Saturn in your first house, and we've got Jupiter retrograding through your fourth house, we have a supporting character here in Chiron in Aries in your second house. And I also think this is important because we're looking at the first quadrant for Pisces. All of this is happening in the houses that are the houses that develop the self, that develop and interact in the human experience and form a conclusion. And if up until now that conclusion is that you are less than, or that you have not done enough, or you're not compassionate enough, or you're not creative enough, or you're, again, having Saturn go through the first house is definitely going to limit something. It's going to restrict it. And if you have any other personal planets in the first house, it's restricting those and highlighting them. So for instance, if Saturn is transiting your first house and Mercury is there, it's limiting your communications. It's also limiting and potentially censoring your social media platforms. And this could be conflicting with how you, feel at home and how you feel nurtured and how you feel healed, which is the fourth house. So this is a really extremely powerful transit for you in particular. Because again, we're looking at the houses that really represent how you were shaped. And the Pisces energy houses some of the more, when we look at Pisces, it rules orphanages, it rules places where we are unseen, where we are hidden. It rules old folks' homes, it rules mental hospitals, it rules prisons, it rules ashrams and temples and places where we worship, but worship alone, in quiet, in meditative silence. So this is an opportunity to shift your beliefs and your expansion. But through the review, you could find some tensions because Pisces is going to want to feel a sense of connection. And as your philosophies have potentially broadened, or your ideologies about money, the potentials of making money, even the potentials of education and how it would serve you could very much come into play. With many of the other signs, I felt like the Jupiter-Saturn square also affected them because of the government and outside sources. And that may be true for Pisces, but for some reason, I feel like it's more of a trigger for you. Any outside influences of restriction, censorship, repression, obligation, or duty could be triggering something from your childhood where you felt invisible or unseen or not important in some way. And now you get to sort of look at those and say, are those true now? Maybe that was then, but is this applicable now? And that's where I believe Chiron really comes into play, because Chiron in your second house of self-worth, of your skills, of the history from your family that shaped your self-worth and self-confidence. This is where Chiron sextile to Jupiter and sextiling on, well, maybe sextiling your first house. No, it would not sextile because Pisces is right there. No, it's only sextiling in Gemini. Pardon me, I got a little excited. I was thinking of Pisces as the 12th house. Not true. So the sextile between Chiron in your second house and Jupiter retrograding in your fourth house can support an extraction of wisdom. I don't believe that we ever get rid of a wound that has been perpetrated on us, especially in childhood. It kind of sets the imprint, but we can extract understanding and wisdom and use that as the inspiration for our transformation. And the transformation shows up in the form of awareness And that's where the square comes back in. Will I make a choice to default to the old because it's familiar and it keeps me connected, even though it doesn't necessarily resonate with who I am now? Or will I stretch and allow myself in my fourth house to be the self-nurturer, to reestablish my home and family that's more aligned into my new philosophies, my new ideologies, or my wanting to expand, wanting a sense of justice and fairness within this home of Gemini, which is about duality. It's also about two things can be true at the same time. People can be a little bit out of balance and yet still be loving. People can perpetrate behaviors that don't serve them and yet still be good people. The thing I think that's going to really hit home for my Pisces is potentially two things. If you are escaping, through food, drugs, alcohol, shopping online, any addictive behaviors could come up here. And it could also be addictions to beliefs about yourself and who you are and your value and how that is received by others. So I think personally that Pisces has so much to offer. And when you stand in the more aligned position to the divinity within you and allow your creativity to be the expression of that, and that could very well be your voice. The second house rules our voice and how we express ourselves. And Chiron's transit through that house can allow you to have a new voice, a new way of speaking to yourself and supporting yourself and showing passion and compassion and empathy for yourself as you allow old behaviors that don't serve you, including thought processes as well as behaviors to the physical, whether it be your material, financial body or your physical body. And you allow those to be realigned by Saturn's transit in your first house. So you're building something sustainable, something that you can feel the reward coming because you're not just working hard for it, you believe in it and you have passion for it at the same time. So this is all very powerful. So the key dates are this. We're going to see Saturn and Jupiter retrograde on Christmas Eve, December 24th. Again, this is in the Pacific time zone. So if you're somewhere else in the world, it might be a day ahead. But this is significant because it's the second time. The first time Jupiter was direct and Saturn was retrograde. The second time Jupiter is retrograde and Saturn is direct. And the third time they meet in 2025, I believe, I don't know why I want to say they're both direct, but I don't know how that quite works out. I think it's because Jupiter's got some speed up and is hitting the end of Gemini when it squares Pisces energy for the last time before it moves into Cancer. But we'll get to that in 2025 because, again, this is like something to do with, there can be shades of government and government control and beliefs clashing, government and money clashing. But more specifically for my Pisces, I think this is more of an internal transit for you, a redefining of the self, a redefining of the passions of the self, the ego of the self, the drive of the self, and the willingness to bet on the self and the new version of Pisces. Okay, so that's that. I think I got to everything. Thank you for listening. Again, my name is Teri Hunter. I'm an intuitive astrologer. Please like, please subscribe, please share, hit that notification bell so you'll know when content comes out. I do a live every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Pacific time. That's where we look at the transits ahead and we get the angel's advice and we pull a tarot card for each sign. And it's fun to interact with the group. So I hope you'll join me and come back because there'll be more content produced as we move forward. Have a lovely Jupiter retrograde. I will see you soon, Pisces. Bye-bye.